All right, guys. Hey, good Thursday morning. Hope that all of you are doing well. We will give folks a couple of minutes here to filter on in to watch our official 2025 harvest season webinar. We are going to go over some key topics, both for agriculture, but also for the rest of hurricane season, for coastal areas, potential severe weather impacts as we go throughout the rest of the fall. A couple of these strong fronts I do think we need to keep an eye on the further we go into the fall season. And then we will also, of course, be talking about the preliminary idea for our winter season. So I will give again folks a moment or two to filter on in, and then we will get started. So appreciate all of you all joining, and looking forward to going through the forecast with you all today. So give everybody just another moment or two, and then we will get started. All right. Looks like everybody is trickling on in now. Wanted to be sure to kind of start out and give a shout out here to Farm Credit Mid America for powering and sponsoring our webinar here. Could not do these webinars without them. Really, really appreciate having them on board once again for another webinar here. I think this is like the eighth straight one that they've been with us for. And so be sure to give them some love, give them a shout out. Really appreciate them sponsoring the webinar today. If you're not familiar with Farm Credit Mid America, they work with farmers, rural residents, agriculture businesses across parts of Arkansas, Indiana, Kentucky, Missouri, Ohio, and Tennessee. And they provide reliable access to credit and financial services. So, again, really, really appreciate having them on board for today's webinar. With that being said, let's get into the detailed breakdown of the harvest outlook. And we want to start here with what's going on right now. It's always really good to have a depiction of, okay, what's going on right now? Where have we been? How will we evolve from here? And how will current conditions ultimately impact what's to come with the forecast ahead? So, very first thing that I want to touch on is the drought monitor. Really hasn't been that big of an issue as we've gone throughout the past several months, but we're starting to see more dryness, more abnormally dry conditions show up. When we take a look at the update, this was actually just from this morning. You can see that we are starting to see more of those yellows and oranges expand down here across parts of Missouri, across parts of Arkansas, western Tennessee, along the Mississippi River. For the last several years, as we've been dealing with, I think this is our fourth or fifth La Nina out of the past 6 years, it has been a theme to have low river levels on the Mississippi River. And heading into the fall season, we're starting to see that trend again. Look at the change here in the drought monitor over the past 4 weeks. We've seen a lot of degradation here in terms of the drought conditions across Arkansas, right along the Mississippi River, Tennessee, Missouri, and starting to creep into parts of the lower Ohio Valley as well. That has been the trend over the past couple of weeks. It's gotten dry across southern Illinois, southern Indiana, parts of Kentucky, and into Ohio, and it's continued to get drier and drier, even with the temperatures right now running a bit cooler than normal. And so this is certainly something that we need to be keeping a very close eye on as we get into the forecast. So continuing on here, guys, taking a look at the summer temperatures in terms of the observations, it was a warm summer as a whole for the eastern third of the United States. In terms of the ranks, top 10 to 20 warmest on record, a lot of this was driven by the very warm overnight lows across the eastern ag belt, which I think will be something that we need to continue to keep in mind when we look at yields as we go throughout this forecast and this webinar here. But in terms of the central part of the country and in terms of the plains, seasonable. In fact, some areas cooler than normal in terms of how the temperature is verified throughout this summer, and also active. Parts of Iowa, parts of Nebraska, parts of South Dakota there, guys, top 10 to 15 wettest on record throughout this season, with a lot of dryness in the western half of the country and a lot of dryness in the northeastern part of the United States. Now, I do want to acknowledge, you go back to our summer forecast, guys, and we've been talking about this in our long range videos on the Clarity platform for the past couple of months now. The initial idea, both from our analogs, our forecast, and all of the model data for the summer was for the central part of the country to be hotter and drier. There's no doubt about it, and we'll be completely upfront with it. That did not pan out. And I want to talk about why. If we take a look here, what happened to those drought risks for the summer? A lot of what I think drove the cooler and especially the active conditions across the central part of the country is the very strong Bermuda high that set up right off the east coast of the US. We had near record breaking warm ocean waters just off of the east coast. That allowed the Bermuda high to expand versus normal. It was way stronger, which allowed for a consistent moisture supply to be further north and west. Rather than the moisture being contained more so to the southeastern part of the country, it was able to shift further to the north and to the west, providing ample and consistent moisture for the middle of the country. You go back in time, and historically, the bigger drivers for summer, and really the past 4 or 5 years up until this year, it's been the Pacific Ocean. The Pacific Ocean has been what has driven the pattern along with El Nino or La Nina. That did not happen this year. And that was really the part that was missed with the forecast. Nothing really changed with Enzo or the Pacific, but this Atlantic force, this Atlantic Bermuda high, ultimately ended up being the more dominant driver throughout this summer, at least up until recently. Because if you look at August, you can see that the moisture is kind of shut off. Certainly, in terms of the more widespread moisture that we dealt with throughout June and throughout July. Still, as we worked through the first half of August, there were plenty of rains across the north central part of the country, but you can certainly see here across the eastern ag belt and down into the Tennessee Valley, it's gotten a lot drier than normal. And so, certainly, that force that we've been dealing with the Atlantic, that pattern driver, has started to fade, and I think the Pacific Ocean beginning to have a little bit of a bigger impact on the pattern as a whole, and I think that's being represented right now with what's going on with our cold fronts ahead. Now, there's a couple of reasons behind this. Tropical forcing is one, our overall background state feeling more La Nina-like right now, but also hurricane activity, I think, earlier this month helped reorient the jet stream in the North Atlantic to allow for more of these shots of colder air. And we're going to see a lot of them over the next couple of weeks. You look at the next 7 days on the left here, much below normal temperatures on average across the eastern third of the country. We will moderate briefly as we get into the early part of September, the first couple of days, but another shot of cold air later next week by Thursday, Friday, Saturday to send temperatures much below normal once again for the eastern half of the country. In terms of precipitation, guys, that's also suppressing the moisture. If we take a look here, guys, drier than normal conditions the next 7 days across the eastern ag belt, across the Canadian prairies. That's an area that's gotten drier throughout the summer as well to an extent, with most of the moisture across the central and the southern plains. We roll that over into the week 2 time frame through the 10th of September. Overall, continuing to lean drier. Maybe not as dry, still some moisture opportunities in here. There's an upper level low we're keeping an eye on, but I would say all things considered, I don't see widespread above normal rain potential, especially for the eastern ag belt and the northern plains as we go over the next few weeks. And I really think that through the midway point of September, we have another strong cold front that we are targeting around the 14th of the month. It's going to allow those temperatures to stay cooler than normal for the first half of September. Now, I am keeping an eye on maybe a warm up late September that we will be monitoring as we get a little bit closer, but I do think through the middle part of the month, it's cooler than normal, will also likely be a little bit drier than normal. Completely bone dry, probably not. You'll probably have days like today where the Great Lakes, Ohio Valley, there's pesky rainfall chances, but overall a drier lean. Which brings me to this next point. It is still summer. Even though it's cooler than normal, those high temperatures for the most part still in the 70s with some 80s mixed in at times in this region of the country, in Illinois, Indiana, Missouri, Kentucky, Tennessee, Arkansas. With the drier than normal conditions, the conditions drying out, you can see the soil moisture forecast over the next 14 days. And then just, again, maybe even a little bit of a warm up later in the month. Keeping an eye on this area that we've highlighted in orange for those drought conditions to continue to expand. I think that we'll continue to see soil conditions dry out in this area, and that is something to keep in mind as we roll things forward. The other caveat that we always have to consider and deal with as we head into September that can always throw a loop in the overall pattern is tropical activity, both in the West Pacific and in the Atlantic. I want to specifically talk about the Atlantic here for a moment. Keep an eye on maybe the 9th to the 12th time frame here in terms of activity beginning to pick up a little bit more. And I do think that is something we need to keep an eye on as we go into the middle part of September. But at least for the next couple of weeks, not looking to be a major deal in terms of activity along the coast. Real quick before we get into the analogs and some of the top pattern drivers, guys, if you don't currently utilize the Clarity Ag platform, that is one of our subscription models that we have. You can scan that QR code in the top right. You can get updates like this on a daily basis in our long range outlook tab. You can get the soil moisture percentile, soil temps in your day-to-day forecast, our insights, and a number of other tools, GDU tracking by plant date. And so if you are interested, 7-day free trial, scan that QR code. We'd love to have you all on board and try out the platform over the next 7 days. So again, be sure to scan that QR code and we'll throw the link there in the comments as well. Taking a look at pattern drivers as we go throughout the rest of September, October, and into November. Per normal, some ones that you all have probably heard about before, talking about La Nina, talking about what's going on in the North Pacific Ocean, and then yes, the Atlantic Ocean, both from a tropical activity standpoint, but also from the Bermuda High standpoint. Does that come back as a factor ahead? If we take a look first at what's going on in our ENSO regions, our El Nino Southern Oscillation regions, you can see here cooler than normal ocean waters developing across the Central Pacific. Once again, trending back towards more of a La Nina state. If we take a look, this is the subsurface waters here that you can see with this chart on the right. We're seeing more and more cool water begin to bubble up just below the surface, indicating that we are going to trend at least close to La Nina conditions as we go throughout the fall. We're not there yet. We're at minus 0.4. That's still technically in cool ENSO territory, but I do think that there's the increasing risk that we could get at least near a weak La Nina as we go throughout the fall months this year. If we take a look at the evolution of this and some of the closest analogs in terms of how this is evolving right now, we have years like last year. Last year is a very good analog from an ENSO perspective. It's not perfect overall, but I do think that there are a lot of similarities that probably become an even bigger deal as we go into winter. That's something we'll touch on here in a little bit as well. But 2024, 2013, 2016, 08, 05, and 2001 are all very close matches to how we are evolving right now with the ENSO state. In terms of how low we go, do we get into a moderate La Nina or a strong La Nina? If we take a look at all of the guidance that we have right now, here's your La Nina line. You can see the majority of models get us right at the line. So we are looking at a cool ENSO or a weak La Nina state as we headed through fall and head into the winter months. And so years that were also weak, or a weak La Nina like we're expecting this year to be, we have years like 2024, 2017, 2013, 08, 2001, and 2000. And then you can see a couple of these years like 24, 13, 08, and 01 were also good with the overall evolution, which is a big impact on how the pattern will evolve. This is the other big thing, and this is probably the most striking pattern driver that we have right now. It's our Pacific Decadal Oscillation. It's just a measure of the ocean waters here in the North Pacific. We are at the lowest value on record, and these records go back to the 1850s. And what that basically means is this warm pull off of the east coast of Asia is warmer than it's ever been. Very, very warm waters in the North Pacific with the cooler waters off of the west coast of North America. What does that ultimately mean for the pattern as we go into fall and winter? It means there can be a tendency at times to get a big North Pacific ridge early in the season at least and get these cold shots of air. Now, that changes a little bit as we get into October and November, but I think this is aiding in some of our cold shots as we go throughout the next several weeks. Another factor is our AMO. Again, this was a big driver, if not the biggest driver, as we went throughout summer. You can see here the Atlantic Ocean is actually cool. Some of that is because of the hurricane that went through there that upwelled some of the cooler water. But this is quite a bit cooler than it was throughout summer, which I think is important, and it means that the Pacific will have a bigger impact on the pattern as we go throughout fall. In terms of years that match closest with the overall oceanic state, the weak La Nina potential, the very warm North Pacific, the Atlantic, the Indian Ocean, the top two right now that show up are 2000 and 2013. And there's a couple of other ones that are close, but those are definitely the best two right now. If you think about those years, if you think forward a little bit, those were colder winters. And again, I think that's something we need to monitor carefully. And even in fall, they had some big cold fronts and some big storm systems, which I think is an important factor from a severe weather standpoint. I think that as we really start to pick up the fall gradient, so we get cooler temperatures to start to bleed in, could deal with some big storm systems, some big cold fronts, and potentially early freeze risk and severe weather potential as we head through the middle part of fall. Now, with that being said, you look at the overall Enso state, it still tends to win out with the warmth. September's cooler, but into October and November, the warmer than normal conditions do tend to win out a little bit. Drier than normal conditions, especially for the Midwest, down through the southern and eastern tier of the U.S., also tend to win out. If we take a look at the Atlantic, while again, I don't think it's as big of a pattern driver right now, it is a warmer risk overall. It's also a slightly wetter risk for the eastern part of the country. Something to watch, but again, maybe not the biggest driver right now. And then you factor in the Pacific Ocean. Even though it's a cooler signal in September, the analogs here into October and November are very warm and they're dry as well. And so this to me would indicate that fall starts out on a cooler note, but we probably get warmer with time. You can see that here. If you look at September of our most negative PDO years, they lean cooler and the correlation leans cooler, especially for the upper Midwest and the Great Lakes. And so the theme here and the idea is fall starts out cooler and it gets warmer as time goes on compared to normal. Obviously, from a climatology standpoint, you're not going to get warmer progressively throughout fall, but I think warmer than normal the back half of fall on the table, but still some strong cold fronts in there that could lead to the freeze risk and potentially the uptick in severe weather for the middle part of the season, which I think means that it's going to be very important if you're making decisions, outdoor decisions, whether it's school activities, whether you have fall festivals, you name it, going to be really, really critical to be able to consult with a meteorologist as we go throughout the fall. These fall systems, these fall fronts, especially when you bring severe weather into the mix, can be very challenging. Model data struggles with them, and it's why consulting with one of our team members is so, so important as we go throughout the fall season. You start talking about insights for frost and freeze. We talk about that on our long-range outlooks. And again, just a more personalized forecast here with the business platform. And so I would love if any of you in here are interested in learning a little bit more about how we can build a custom plan for you, personalize your experience from a weather perspective for your exact needs, scan that QR code. We'd be happy to help you all out as we go throughout potentially a tricky part of the year. With all that being said, I want to talk about the fall forecast. I want to talk about the outlook, what analogs look like. Do we have model data support? Obviously not the be-all, end-all. Model data really, really struggled throughout the summer months. And then our official outlooks. Let's start here. Fall analogs, 2021, 2013, 2011, 2008, 2001, and 2000. I wouldn't say one particular year stands out that's substantially better than the rest. I think together as a blend, good signal here. I would say a good signal overall for slightly warmer than normal conditions. The further north you go, maybe much above normal northern plains Canadian prairies, but you can see the tendency here that we have in September and even I think to an extent in October for cold fronts to try to bleed down into the eastern part of the country. Probably more ups and downs as we head into October and November. And I think that's highlighted in here with following the drier start to fall, more active across the eastern ag belt, the Ohio Valley, and into the Great Lakes, with more of the drier risk south and through the middle part of the country. In terms of model data, terms of what the guidance says, they tend to skew warmer. They tend to have a big warm bias, but the general orientation matches with our analogs. It also generally favors that drier risk as well. And so, factoring all of that in, all of the different analogs, here's our official September, October, and November outlook. I do think that while we start out the season cooler with these shots of cold, we can get progressively warmer perhaps by the last third of September. Typically, that's going to favor some drier conditions as well, but I think with time, especially Ohio Valley, Great Lakes, getting more active October and into November. If we take a look at that forecast, you can see September is the coolest month. You can still see some cooler than normal conditions down here across the southeast part of the country as we head into October. But then, especially into November, more widespread above normal temperatures. I would say if there's a risk, it would be this cooler air tries to come more so into the central part of the country. As a result, I also think November is the most active month of the season. That being said, even with the warmer risk mid to late fall, because of the stronger cold front risk and increasingly active pattern with time, we look at our analogs for freeze here on the left. Most of these cities, Omaha, Indy, Minneapolis, St. Louis, Sioux Falls, Wichita, tend to have an earlier than normal first freeze. Across parts of the upper Midwest, Peoria, Columbus, Des Moines, Fargo, those areas tend to be closer to normal. First frost, however, if you subscribe to Clarity, if you're a current client, you currently utilize our long-range outlooks, you've seen the harvest forecast that we've been putting in here in Clarity, and we need to keep an eye on late next week and through the middle part of the month for the upper Midwest, Northern Plains, and the Great Lakes. You can see there's a sharp cutoff because as we warm up late September, it's going to be harder to get these shots of cold to produce frost risk further down to the south. But earlier than normal first frost for a good part of Minnesota, the Dakotas, parts of Wisconsin, Michigan, I certainly think are on the table. And I'd be keeping a very close eye on as early as late next week, pending how strong this front ends up verifying. And so certainly need to be keeping a very close eye on next week and beyond heading into the month of September. All things considered, I would say an above normal risk for an earlier first frost and freeze for the ag belt as a whole. I do want to also talk about corn yields real quick because we kind of, for July, in terms of the weather, we're out here on our own. This chart here is a look at the rainfall anomaly for the corn belt and the temperature anomaly at lows for the corn belt. And you can see it was one of the wettest but warmest Julys on record in terms of those overnight lows. Closest match here, 2010. With the drier trends late in the season, the summer as a whole actually ends up looking somewhat like last year. Both of those years ended up below normal with trendline. I think trendline is just above 183. You can correct me if I'm wrong there. Just above 183. This would hint that maybe some initial indications of a normal to above normal trend line yield this year for corn might be a little bit overdone, especially given some of the increasing dryness, even with the cooler air right now. Something to keep in mind, something we're monitoring. We'll have an update on this in Clarity, combining both July and August. You can see the colors here indicate what the yield was versus the trend. Generally speaking, the warmer years with the overnight lows that also were drier, of course, are the least favorable years, while the years that are cooler and more active tend to be better. 2025 kind of out in no man's land by itself with 2010, which was slightly below normal. In terms of hurricane season, as we go throughout the rest of fall, we can see here, I think mid-September, starting to see more upward motion near Africa that can send waves off into the Atlantic and start to spawn activity. While it's been very quiet, hurricane season is certainly not over yet. If we look at our fall analogs, the indications here, guys, would be that hurricanes for the season are a little bit below normal. Major hurricanes normal to slightly below normal, but there are indications that we could get more active the back half of the season. I'd be keeping an eye on mid to late September for an uptick in activity. I think when all is said and done, the year as a whole is probably close to normal in terms of the classification. It's not going to be the most memorable hurricane season ever, but certainly for the Gulf and for the East Coast, there are some signals that down the road the activity can start to pick up. So if you're making decisions along the Gulf Coast, the East Coast, certainly still don't want to let your guard down. I really do think that we can have some sneaky storms that aren't really being picked up yet the back half of this season. And so it's been quiet so far, but don't let it make you complacent because I really do think that there are still some risks to monitor ahead. Again, will it be the biggest season ever? It's not going to be a 2020 or a 2005. Probably won't even be as notable as 2008 here in terms of 8 hurricanes and 5 major hurricanes. But could we end up with 5 or 6 hurricanes and a couple more major hurricanes? I don't think that's off the table at all as we go through the back half of the season. We haven't even hit the peak climatology yet for hurricane season. I do want to turn attention here real quick. And guys, if you have questions, feel free to throw in the chat here questions that you might have about the pattern, about the forecast, things that we're seeing ahead. Happy to help with that. If we take a look here at severe weather, this is certainly something that I think needs to be monitored. The strong cold front signals are in there based off of analogs above normal severe weather threats as we head through the back half of fall, October, November especially, across Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, Iowa, into parts of Michigan, maybe Kentucky as well. Now, don't get me wrong here, you're not looking at like a repeat of spring. It's not going to be that active, but compared to normal, could there be an extra severe weather event or two as we head throughout October and November? I certainly think it's possible. If you go back to a year like 2013, there was a major severe weather outbreak in the middle part of November. 2001 and 2000 both had some pretty decent severe wind events in the fall. And so I definitely think that while it's quiet right now, as we get more active, as we get these stronger fronts through the middle part of the fall season, severe weather activity I do think can be above normal in the Midwest, but less active if you're further down to the south across parts of the deep south and the southeastern part of the country. All of that leads me to the winter sneak peek because a lot of the analogs are the same. Really, the main difference is we threw in 24-25 for winter. While I don't think it's perfect with the tropical forcing for fall, it's loose at least, and I think it's a good analog as we head into winter. In fact, the similarities with the weak La Nina or cool Enzo are very, very similar to last year. But the top ocean analogs, guys, 2013, 14, and 2000, 2001 were some of the most blockbuster winters that we've had in the past 30 years. That's not the call right now because I see signals for a trough in the North Atlantic, cooler air in the North Atlantic, which tends to favor a positive NAO and tends to favor warmth in the southern and eastern portion of the country. But I do think that what this does mean is there can be some decent shots of cold air and cold air outbreaks heading into the winter. I don't think that, again, the South is as cold as last year because of that signal in the North Atlantic. But can it be a more active winter? Can there be cold shots? I think so. I think it's very similar to last year, just a little bit warmer south, which favors the storm track and the above normal snow to be shifted more so into the Midwest. A better season possible for the upper Midwest, Illinois, Missouri, maybe the Central Plains. That means a battleground sets up in the Ohio Valley, in the Tennessee Valley, along the Mississippi and the Ohio rivers. Can be some big snowstorms, can be ice storms. 2008 is an analog. There was a big ice storm that year. And then you can also get into the warm sector and most of the snow goes north. So a lot of variability in this pink area. Probably really, really critical if you're in the pink area more than anywhere. If you have a business or you're making winter decisions, operational decisions, staffing, resources, to be able to talk to us because when you get into these, these very tricky scenarios, these fine lines between rain, snow, sleet, you name it, really, really important to be able to talk to somebody to walk you through those risks so you can go out, treat, plow when you need to, or not. when you don't need to. So just managing that more efficiently, I think, in this pink area going to be even more critical as we head into the winter. There is a colder risk. As we touched on 13, 14, 2000, 2001, both very cold years. We're leaning warmer than this right now because of the positive NAO. Keeps the colder air to the north generally. The strong negative PDO also tends to favor the eastern ridge into winter. But these are the top four Enso analogs. These are the best matches for strength, placement, and the evolution of the weak La Nina potential or the cool Enso state. These are very cold. And so while our forecast right now is warmer south and east, I do think the risk to the forecast is colder. We don't see enough signals yet to bite on this big of a cold risk, but I do think the risk leans more cold than warm based off where we stand right now. And just the simple fact that there are a lot of similarities to last year can tell you that. Last year ended up cooler than normal. You had the furthest south snow, the heaviest snow along the Gulf Coast on record, which tells you that when we do have cold blasts, they can certainly pack a punch. Guys, I really, really appreciate you all tuning in and listening to the webinar today. Again, want to give a shout out to Farm Credit Mid-America for powering and sponsoring this webinar. This is, again, the fourth one of the year or the third one of the year. They've been with us for all of them for the past 2 years, and we really, really appreciate having them on board to power this. Be sure to go check them out, give them a call if you need their assistance. Guys, if you want more information on how we can assist from a business consulting perspective, especially, be sure to inquire there, scan that QR code, and send in your information. A team member will reach out to you as soon as possible to get you some more information. Or if you're just looking for a more detailed forecast for personal use to get updates like this at times, you can download the Clarity Weather app for personal use directly in the App Store. It's $99 a year. You can sign up for it, download the app there, sign up for it right in the app, and then you're good to go for the next year. So with all that being said, I will go here and I will answer a couple of questions. Do you think we could see a repeat of what we had in November of 2013, I believe, when a tornado took out the Lebanon Starbucks? It's really hard to say that it's going to be exactly like a specific event, but I did bring November 2013 up because I think that there can be bigger severe weather events like that. Whether it's in Indiana, whether it's in Kentucky, Iowa, Ohio, there's no way to know at this distance. But that being an analog does bring up the risk that there can be some bigger severe weather events as we head throughout the fall. Thank you, Heather. Thank you for watching. Really, really appreciate it. I'm going to throw here in the chat the link. Here is the trial link if anybody would like to do the ag trial or the business trial. And then if you want more information from our team to see how we can customize a plan for you, you can click that Get Started button. We are more than happy to help. All right. I don't see any other questions right now. If there are any other questions, we'll give you all another minute or two to throw those in. Again, I just want to thank all of you for watching another webinar here with us. It will be winter before we know it. We'll be doing our winter webinar, but certainly looks like fall could be an interesting season in terms of frost and freeze potential, the severe weather potential as well. All right. Guys, appreciate this. We'll be sure to send out the full recording after the fact as well. Again, thank you so much for tuning in, and hope that you all have a great day. Let's see. Oh, one more. Yep. Thank you, Don. Really appreciate that. So, guys, thank you so much. Enjoy the nice weather ahead, and we will chat with you soon.